All right, guys. Well, welcome back. We did it. We made it to episode 1. I want to say thank you to everyone. I will, at some point, get better at intros. I'll probably get some intro music and all that fun stuff. But for now, you guys are just going to have to put up with these awkward, random, just jumping into it beginnings that we're going to have for now. But, yes, as I was saying, I want to say thank you to everyone. You guys are phenomenal, amazing. I literally cannot find the words in the English language to even begin to tell you what this feedback has been to me. So many of you have just said some of like the nicest things ever to me, and I could not be more grateful. I really feel like I got so lucky with the people in my life, and I was thinking about it today. Like, I wouldn't go back and I wouldn't change anything about the way that my life has gone, even if it meant being able to erase some hardships or some pain in the past. I wouldn't change a thing because I wouldn't want to risk losing any of the people that I have been so lucky to call my friends or my loved ones or my family. And so just from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. Y'all are amazing, and I really am going to do everything I can to keep making stuff that you guys enjoy first and foremost and are proud of. So, with that being said, I had a full week to really think about what I wanted to do for this episode. I will be calling this one episode 1, but it will be another solo one. And when I had first posted episode 0, my knee-jerk reaction of what I was going to do next was going to be like, all right, I don't want to talk again alone to a microphone. I want to have friends on, even if it means like just grabbing Joel and Dylan and sitting them down and having a little off-the-cuff, authentic conversation. That was kind of the secret sauce, or like the go-to strategy of the previous podcast I was a part of, and I think it was really successful. I think it made for like a lot of awesome, authentic conversations. So that was like my first initial response, but I thought about it more, and I thought about kind of the reason I'm doing this podcast entirely, like in general, and it made me realize that I wanted to do one more episode of just me and kind of giving you guys some more background into me, maybe some further insight into who I am as a person and what I believe and where I'm coming from. I'm not going to dump everything out on this episode. I think that a lot of stuff is just naturally going to come out due to conversations with people I'll have on. But I feel like there are some core things that I would love to speak on that are like deep foundational things for me that would be really useful to lay out here early, so that as we go into conversation later, perhaps some jokes that I make or some things that I say, there won't be any confusion as to who I am as a person or what I believe or how I meant a certain thing. I'll kind of use some of this episode to bolster that stuff. With that being said, I really want this episode to center around optimism. I'm a very optimistic person myself, and that goes for the way that I see the world, the way that I see myself and where my own life is going, and the way that I think the outside world and like the bigger picture, country, society, the future, whatever you want to call it, the external world, I also am optimistic about the direction things are going. And I feel like the world needs a little bit more of that. And I would like to say that I feel like I have a decent enough articulated perspective that I should be able to share it and it would resonate with some people. I understand right off rip the direct association that optimism has with being a naive person. And my goal here is to lay out a case for everyone that optimism is actually the natural place that you get to once you have swallowed certain hard truths. Because I know that I've gotten some feedback from some friends of mine who have kindly put in a way that they think that am a little naive for my beliefs. And ironically, I kind of have the opposite perspective or opinion on them, where I'm like, what if you have the reverse of whatever rose-colored lenses are on, and you're overly pessimistic, and we could get you to a place where you're being more realistic, and that just inherently makes you more optimistic. So we're going to dive into that today. And I think an important thing that I want to touch on, because I feel like I need to lay down some foundational axioms, or not really, axioms may not be the right word, but some foundational personal truths, I guess we'll call them, that I feel like I have come to, that I feel like are very important to understand before even moving forward. So one of the biggest ones, and if a lot of my friends already know this one, if they've got to sit down and have like a really deep, fleshed out conversation with me, is I have a very strong personal belief about truth. I think that people often mix up something being true with something making sense. I think making sense is something completely different. And if this sounds a little confusing, I'll, hash it out a bit here. Something can make sense when it is explained to you, even if it is explained step by step. And that does not mean that it is true. There are a lot of truths in this world that I believe right off rip do not make sense, quote unquote. And the only reason anything can make sense is because it properly fits into your own personal worldview or previous opinions that perhaps you don't even know or haven't fully deeply validated if they are right or not. So I have this fun little thought experiment that I do with my friends whenever I dive into this type of conversation. And it's my favorite way to differentiate between something making sense versus something being true. And it was this old joke that I remember being told, and I just thought it was a perfect example of it. I remember it being about dialogue between two people, and one of them said, "Hey, I learned the other day that elephants are really good at hiding in trees." And person B responds, and they say, "What? No, they're not. Elephants don't hide in trees." And person A says, "Well, why do you believe that?" And person B says, "Well, I've never seen an elephant in a tree." And person A says, "Yes, exactly. You're proving my point. Elephants are that good at hiding in trees." And I think this kind of little mini story is really fun because it lays out exactly how easy it is for something to make sense and still not be true. I know that the example I gave is hyperbole and pretty ridiculous, but when you apply the thought process of you can get told something that sounds like it makes complete sense, and it is just so far from the truth, and it could sound like it makes so much sense that it's something that you never consider fact checking. And I'm not here to tell you that you need to go fact check or Google every single thing that you get told, but I am here to say that I think it's really, really important to be able to differentiate between the two, because there could possibly be some things right now that you believe that are wrong, and not like kind of wrong, but like absolutely wrong. And the only reason you never realized it was because the thing that you believe makes sense. And I really try to do my best to not like judge people for coming to incorrect conclusions when the thing being explained to them on the surface, it makes sense. But knowing the difference between the two, I think, is really crucial. And the reason I think it's crucial is because I believe that inside our head, we have our own model of how the world works, right? It's where all of our beliefs slot in nice and easy, and it paints this perspective of reality that kind of helps us predict how things are or how things are going to be. And I think that a huge reason that a lot of people are extremely unhappy is because they have an inaccurate model of how the world really works. I think that for better or for worse or whatever reasons, a lot of people have consumed and taken on some incorrect beliefs about reality itself. And those beliefs then form their expectations, and then they are consistently let down or upset or surprised by the way that the world works. And I think that if you pursue truth over anything, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how much it puts you into an existential crisis, if you really put it at the highest value, then you will be building the most accurate internal model for how reality is, and you will consistently not be surprised, let down, or upset by the way that the world is. I think that for anyone to even take on a sustainable stance of optimism, you have to be able to swallow a lot of the really hard truths in life. There are certain lessons that we learn the hard way, and we never forget because of that. And then there are certain people who just don't learn, even though the hard way is pounding into their head for whatever personal reason that they are snagged on psychologically. They just are not learning. And I think that's a good example of someone who can't implement a correct internal model of the world, and then will continue this cycle of problems happening and being upset and being shocked by turns that events take. And so I think another really important aspect of all of this that relates to the idea of pursuing truth is also the idea that conversationally, as long as you're approaching it the right way, you can truly understand anyone's perspective. I will be the first to say that there will be nothing like living that perspective. So, if I'm a part of group A and you're a part of group B, and I've had a certain life up to a certain point and you've had a different life than me, I think that, of course, on the deepest level, only people of group A will be able to relate to me on some of the things that I have experienced. And the same goes for you being a part of group B. But I think that if that was the case and we weren't able to relate or understand each other conversationally, then we wouldn't make any progress, and everything would be extremely tribal, and there would be a much bigger struggle when it comes to understanding someone who's not quite like you. So I think that it is really important to acknowledge the fact that just because someone is not from your group of people doesn't mean that you can't help them understand you on a deeper level. If you both approach the conversation as friends and with kindness and with understanding that it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be instinct for this person to understand where you're coming from, but if you patiently and kindly explain and lay out your experience and your perspective to someone who has an open ear, you will help they will understand, and perhaps they may even understand at a more accurate level than someone who is a part of your group but is in denial about certain truths or hasn't learned certain lessons quite yet. So I think that that's a part of why I believe conversation is just so critically important to this whole thing. And I have one more critical point to talk about before I get into my case for optimism, and that is accountability. I think that 75% of the people that I know that have chronic problems in their life, whether they're social or financial or emotional/mental, I think that 75% of those issues or those cases could be solved by the proper mindset with accountability. I think that it is so easy nowadays to just hand off the problems that you're having in your life or the issues as being someone else's fault, whether it be a person or a corporation or a group or a government. It is very, very easy and very comforting to tell yourself that the reason that your life is not going the way that you want or the direction that you want is because of something else other than you. And there are instances of where that is the truth. I mean, something really fucked up could have happened to you, and it could have been the direct result of what someone else is doing. However, someone with the proper handle on a accountable mindset will acknowledge the fact that no matter how bad of a thing happens to you or how bad of a circumstance you are in, you are the only person who is going to do anything about it. You're the only person that you have any sort of control over to change things. Problems that happen to you once or twice because of some unfortunate, unlucky thing, that's just going to happen. And everyone is going to endure that, and it's not going to be fair or evenly spread out. There are going to be a lot of people who get an easier life than you off of pure luck, and there are going to also be a lot of people who have it way worse than you do, and they do not deserve it. The difference is that if you keep having mistakes or issues or problems over the long term, that is directly because of your decision making. And I think the reason that I'm even getting into accountability as one of these prerequisites before I dive into optimism is because I feel like a lot of people can't even adopt a optimistic mindset about the way that their life is going, like the trajectory that their life is on, because they have a incorrect relationship with accountability. If you don't feel like you have any control over the way that your life is going, or if you feel like you are under the thumb of a group or a government or a corporation, whatever you want to pin the blame of your suffering on, if you don't take accountability for your own life, you will never be free to change it. And I think that's super, super important if you are going to have the mindset of my life is going to get better. Things are going to get better. The only way you can truly think that is if you actually believe you can change it to be what you want it to be. If you actually have some sort of steer on the direction that your ship is traveling. And so I think some of these things that, perhaps to a lot of you, this stuff is common sense, and maybe it's just good to touch on again. But to a lot of other people that I do know, some of you need to reconsider your relationship with accountability for the best reasons. Your life will get better. It will get a lot better. Within the short to medium term future, it will get a lot better because you will know that you alone are responsible for the decisions you make, and the decisions that you make over the long term are going to be the thing that sets apart your life from being what you want it to be or being, quite frankly, insufferable. Okay, so with that being said, before I make my case for optimism, let's acknowledge things for what they are. Things feel bad a lot of the time, especially when you are online or you're reading news articles or you're even watching the news or just listening to that, one person in your life, whether it be a family member or a coworker, who just cannot stop talking about how fucked up the world is and how it's just so wrong for so many reasons. You got to understand that a lot of the places that you get your information from are set up so that they incentivize pandemonium. I'm not saying that these media outlets or these social media companies have these evil hand-rubbing people on the top who are purposefully trying to make the world a more chaotic place. I think it is just the way the incentive structure is inherently set up. When a news company who needs to make money off advertisements to stay afloat puts out a very positive story about a nice lady who opens up a salon and is starting her own business, and they make very little money on that article because very few people click on it, versus they put out a story about that same woman brutally being killed in some awful accident or, God forbid, a murder, that article will blow up. You always hear about that stuff because that is the stuff that we share. It is deeply ingrained in us to pay attention to those things for good reason. And so when you are a media company, whether social media or mainstream news or local news, when you see that and you think, okay, if I want to be able to keep the lights on, I need to be posting profitable stories. And it is so much harder to write a profitable story about a positive event that happened versus some horrid tragedy. And I don't think that is something that will change. I don't think that this is just, our culture is fucked up here in America and people are just so obsessed with grotesque things. I truly believe that this is just inherent human nature. I think that over the millions of years that we have been here, it has been drummed into us that it pays off from an evolutionary perspective to pay attention to danger, to pay attention to things that kill someone around you or things that are jarring and could cause social uproar. Because if you don't pay attention to those things, you could very quickly become a victim of what's causing it. And I think that for good reason, like I said, this mindset has been ingrained into human nature. So I'm really moving forward in life with the perspective that it'll never change the fact that news companies will make the most money off of telling terrible, awful, horrible things that have happened, and social media companies will never stop making money off of causing the most controversial, awful conversations to be had. Of course, you will always get your cat videos, and of course, you will always get your funny memes and your positive things, because thankfully we're not just hyper fixated on the negative, but when it comes to the way that ad incentive structures are set up, more people pay attention to something that is jarring or novel than they do about something that is just positive for the sake of being positive. So I understand why things feel bad, especially if you're chronically online, like a lot of people my age are, where you just have that, fucking 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour screen time, and you get all of your information about how the world works from the phone in your hand. It is so easy for that to just subconsciously become your reality. You think because it's all you're exposed to that it's all there is, and you don't even realize you think that until you're having this conversation and you're like, man, like I just don't think things were this bad when I was a kid or when I was a teenager or even in 2018. Like I know people love to glorify the years of like 2013 to like 2019, like that nice stretch right before the pandemic when things were just awesome. And the truth is, things have always been this fucked up. Actually, things have always consistently been worse. When you look at some of the metrics of historically how society and life and humans have been, and I'll get into some of that later, things were way worse. But all that to say, the spread of positive things to negative things is not organically accurate online, and is definitely not organically accurate on the news. Another thing that I feel like is crucial to this is that I don't believe evil people exist. I know that nowadays it's really easy to see some of the worst takes you have ever seen in your life on Twitter or on Reddit or on Instagram, where someone screenshots something on Twitter or Reddit, because those places are cesspools along with a handful of other smaller websites. But I truly do not believe evil people exist. I know it's so commonplace nowadays to just hurl the worst words and insults at people specifically who do not agree with you politically, or to witness other people hurling these words. But I really think that everyone's intentions when they act are most of the time selfish, but also most of the time good intentions. I don't think that there are many people who actively behave with evil intent. I think that if people do that, then they're incredibly misguided, or they genuinely have an actual like brain issue, that there's something wrong with their wiring to where they are not functioning properly. But that's not most people. That's not 99.9% of people. For instance, if you take a moment to think about how enjoyable it is when you watch a movie and you're watching it through the hero's perspective, and he is on the small team of ragtag rebels, and he is fighting against this big, evil, tyrannical force that is actively making the world worse and worse and worse. And you watch these ragtag rebels do everything they can to just get scrappy and take down this huge force. That is the exact perspective that Al-Qaeda had during the 9/11 attacks. It's the exact perspective that ISIS has during their campaigns. If you can relate to that story and that feeling and those emotions that you get when you watch something like that, then you are relating to some of the worst terrorists that this world has ever seen, because these people truly believe that, like, the West, us, are evil. They go directly, we act directly against their most sacred inner morals, and they believe that the world would be a better place if we were just eradicated, completely wiped off the face of the earth. And of course, these are extremists, right? I think it goes without saying that you don't have to assume that that's the overall Islamic perspective. But regardless, the point stands that you can relate to these people. You can relate to the rebel cause. And I don't think that people who commit acts like that most of the time are evil. And I think that's kind of an important thing, because I think that when it comes to empathizing with others and being able to think that the world is becoming a better place over time, you need to be able to view that person as just a unfortunately misguided human being. You have to be able to see the kid in them that at some point hit a fork in the road and chose the wrong path. Because if you can't do this, then you will forever be stuck assuming that the world is just made up of good and evil people, and it always will be. And so since we will always be stuck with this, things are just not going to get better. And the reason that I bring any of this up when it comes to my perspective on evil people is because I think that nowadays, like I said in the prior episode, like, we need empathy and we need conversations between people who disagree more than ever. It has become this virtuous commonplace act to announce to the world that you refuse to maintain any sort of relationship with people who do not share your political perspective or your perspective on certain hot topics. And I think that people who do this are actively making the world worse. I think you are actively contributing to tribalism. And I think that you need to stop viewing people who disagree with you as evil, because they're not. Most of the time, on a deep and complex problem, at some point, one person is right and the other person probably is wrong and has not realized it. But in what world are you going to be able to win them over, or at least show them that the other side, quote unquote, the people that disagree with them, show humanity, show empathy, show compassion, show kindness? But if you are consistently reinforcing their preconceived notion that the people who disagree with them are just fucked up, rude bigots, when you completely cut them off because of their misguided opinion, and from your perspective, their misguided opinion on something that matters to you, you are actively telling them that what you think of me, all these negative thoughts you have about me and everyone who shares this opinion, you're right. We are mean. We are rude, and we do not want anything to do with you, even if you think you're right. Because from their perspective, they're not just acting out of evil intention. They don't even know where part of their brain went that makes sense to something that wasn't true. And the only person who is going to convince them otherwise, if they genuinely are wrong about this touchy topic, is a friend. How the amount of people, and I'm going to get a little ranty here, but the amount of people that think that shame is the proper tactic to change the opinion of other people are so misguided. And in what situations have a large swath of people shamed you into the right perspective and you felt good about it? Because I can tell you now, if you've had a mob of people shame you into changing your mind, you didn't change your mind. You succumbed to social pressure, but you didn't actually change the underlying things that you believed. Now you act in accordance because you have fear of retaliation of this large mob of people, not because you actually believe it. You believe there are negative consequences, but if someone were to sit down with you and break down your logic and break down your beliefs, you would probably talk yourself in circles because you would be actively taking on a stance that deep down you never actually got convinced out of. You got shamed out of. You got pushed out of. You got forced out of. But if you want to create a world, or at least an environment socially around you, where you can have active, kind, and productive conversations with people, you have to let go of shame as a tactic. You have to let go of pointing to other people and being like, well, look how many people agree with me. Look how many people think you're a bad person for believing that. That either makes them act out of fear in the way that you want, or it makes them clam up, double down, dig their heels in, and resent you, and resent anyone who shares your opinion in the same fashion that you share it. I think that the sooner that we can kind of dispel this culture that has actively done this, because it used to be that cancel culture was a purely left thing. But I think that from, with my finger on the pulse of people and conversations, particularly online, I think the right is trying to swing that pendulum back and do the same exact thing. And at some point, some side has to be the bigger person. And this will be another rant that I get into for another time. But I really do want to emphasize on the fact that you need to see people as people. You have to stop seeing them as evil. You have to stop seeing them as actively acting out in a way where they want to make the world worse. Sure, when someone has misguided, selfish intentions, hell, when someone has misguided good intentions, they can make awful decisions and make horrible things happen in this world. But again, you want to be able to convince them from the perspective of a kind human being and maybe even a friend that they're misguided and that it's okay and they don't need to feel like an idiot or they don't need to feel like a bad person for being misguided, because nobody is actively going out here and trying to believe the wrong thing for the sake of causing more hurt in this world. So yeah, and I know that what I'm saying, what I'm asking of people is not easy. A lot of the reality of the world sucks. Truth hurts. And thankfully, we have the hedonic treadmill, and we eventually find our way back to happiness no matter how life goes, for the most part. I know that that's kind of a blanket statement, and there's more nuance, I understand. But you have to look at reality for what it is. You cannot look at things for what other people are, but you have to look at reality for what it is. You cannot let other people tell you what it is. And I know I'm getting on a little bit of a side tangent here, but I really do think that it will loop back in well to the overarching theme. And that is that I invite, I went over the list of people who either followed me or are listening or whatever, and saw and just kind of wanted to get a gauge for what the kind of majority leans like politically and on beliefs and all of that stuff. And to my surprise and to my delight, it is really evenly split. I seem to have the same amount of left-leaning, center moderate, and right-leaning people listening to me, which is really cool. I want to say I really, really adore being able to take in multiple people's perspectives on things. And for people who don't know, I grew up in a conservative household with a relatively moderate middle stance extended family, and then in California, which is a liberal state. So, and then on top of that, the Antelope Valley is very mixed. You have a lot of conservatives here and you have a lot of liberals here. And so it's been awesome. I've got to have so many loving relationships with people who have very, very different views. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, like I said at the beginning of the episode, the thing that is the most important to me truly is truth, not whether or not it clicks off rip or it, on the surface makes sense, but real hard, unfortunate or fortunate, whatever it may be, truths. And I invite you as the listener to do the same, even if it's in private. When you're here listening to a podcast, a lot of the times, it's with headphones in and alone, or in the car alone, and no one else is going to be here to socially pressure you into any of your beliefs. I understand just even if it's subconscious, like the pressure that you get from your tribe, quote unquote, whether it's the political party or political group that you identify with, or it's your family and their values that they have raised you on, or it's your friends and their values that they expect of you. No one is here to tell you that you have to believe anything. My goal for a lot of this is I want to bring people on that I adore, that are probably going to have a different opinion than you. And you're allowed to change your mind. You really are. Especially if you think that you have found something that is true, not just makes sense. So to my liberal listeners, if I bring someone on and they dive into a conversation about firearms to a level of detail that you have never had because none of your friends or family have any perspective or any care in the world for firearms, and it has sparked some interest or maybe even a shift in perspective in you, do not be afraid to be someone who changes their mind on firearms or on gun control or on the Second Amendment. And then to my conservative listeners, if I bring someone on who lays out a really good perspective or argument for universal health care in a way that makes sense to you, do not be afraid of changing your mind and being more pro-universal health care. And I'm not saying that either of these things are opinions that I personally subscribe to. I'm just saying that if you think that it is true and you can dive into the details on your own and prove that it is true, then all the more reason for you to start genuinely considering the fact that maybe you were wrong about something. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong. I think it's one of my favorite quirks or attributes of people is when they take being wrong really well and they can handle it and they can swallow the bitter pill and they can adjust and they can move forward. And so I think if you're capable of doing that, especially when someone comes on and they don't really have any hostility about what they're talking about, it really can help you start to look at the fact that you could make your own life better. You can start adopting some of that optimism, because when you have that moment where you don't necessarily have to agree with the things that you feel socially pressured to agree with, and you can pursue truth in private on your own with no one breathing down your neck, that opens the doors for you to be able to actively make your life better. And that will inherently, see how I'm reeling it back in, bring you to a more optimistic perspective. And I think that's incredibly valuable. I got to do some of this stuff on a very deep level just alone on YouTube years ago. God, back when I was like 19, 20. And it was such a pivotal moment in my life. It made me be fully responsible for my opinions and everything that I collected, and making sure I was right about what I believed. I didn't want to be embarrassed, and or should I say, I didn't want to come off as embarrassing when I was publicly stating my opinions, or even just stating my opinions to my friends or to people who were more knowledgeable than me. I wanted to make sure that I was pretty on the money, and also very comfortable with saying I don't know, rather than trying to assume or come up with a solution on the fly to look smart. And look, I don't expect myself to be able to articulate everything that causes me to have a personal, optimistic perspective on my own life and where it's going within this one episode. Again, I don't think I'm really good at talking to a microphone alone yet, at least not as good as I think I could be, but I think that the main contributors are my belief that I have control over my life and that I can actively make it better, and that nothing is going to stop that. Some things may slow it down, but I will get there eventually. And also the fact that I have some of the best people in my life, and I feel like I am worthy of having these people in my life because I've worked on myself enough to be a valuable friend and to be compassionate and to see them for human beings before I see them for whatever labels I'm going to slap on them or other people slap on them. So I don't think it's a coincidence that I have great people in my life, but I'll never take it for granted. And with that being said, there is the second kind of half of this optimistic thing that I want to dive into, and that's looking outward to the world. Right? We've talked about personal optimism, but I really want to get more into kind of the looking at the future of the world and where it's going and how things are going. I got to tell you guys, I'm excited for the future. I know that, for my liberal listeners out there, my left-leaning friends, things may not be looking so good right now because Trump going in office, and then meanwhile the conservatives are celebrating and jumping around for joy, and I'm sure there's a shit ton of people in the middle who just don't care, and I relate to that. But I think regardless, because I do want to actually, let me real quick, I do want it to be said that I am left-leaning. I empathize with a lot of conservative values. I grew up on a lot of conservative values, and there are ones that I vehemently disagree with, and there are also ones that I think have a lot of value that the left is actually kind of missing out on, and this will be another talk for another time. But I do want to be a little transparent here and say that I am a left-leaning person. And so kind of felt like I had to get that out of the way because I don't want to act like some vague wizard behind the cloth where you don't really know anything about where I actually stand on things. And I kind of know that I'll be getting into this in future episodes, so I'm not putting too much emphasis on it. But regardless to left-leaning or right-leaning or who's in office or who the president is or who won the election or blah, 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 I really do think things are getting better. I think that there actually is a case to be made that things have been getting better for a while now. I was looking up some facts because I was prepping for this. I wrote an essay just to prep my mind for this, and I got 4 or 5 pages in, 2,000 words deep, and I was like, okay, I think I've done enough. But when I was kind of prepping for this episode, I learned some really, really eye-opening things about the trajectory of the world and where we've been going. One of the things that I thought was kind of mind-boggling, because I was thinking about the perspective of imagine you grab someone from the 1800s and brought them in here. There's so many things we take for granted that they would be this is magnificent. The emperors and kings and presidents and whoever, the richest and most powerful people of our day don't have luxuries like this that us as common folk have that we take for granted every day. Amazing plumbing and warm water and air conditioning and a cell phone that does everything twice. But when I was looking at some of this stuff, something that kind of blew my mind was that in the year 1900 in the United States, our life expectancy was 47 years old. I understand that life expectancy is kind of calculated by the average of how long people live, and that a lot of that is due to child mortality, which also is another thing that I've learned about. But that kind of blows my mind. Like even in 1950, 50 years later, it was only 68. And now, at least like this is according to Harvard. And I think as far as they got on this article I was looking at was 2019. And then in 2019, it's 79. So we've just had this consistent uptick that is like drastic in my opinion. 47 years old in 1900, like that's horrible. If anyone nowadays dies at 47 or even at 68, people are like, God, like they had so much more to go. Like what a tragedy. We lost someone way before their story had been told. And to think that you could take someone from an era that we still have photographs and movies and music from, and then take them here and tell them, yeah, we added like 47 to 79. I'm going to have to do like quick math here. 32 years onto our life expectancy, or even from 1950 to now, we added 11 years. Like that's incredible. And I think that with modern medicine and the way that things are going, I think we're going to keep pushing that. There are some really, really interesting cases to be made about our lifespan and where we are going. But I found that super interesting. And when it came to the child mortality one, global child mortality rates in 1960 were 19%, which means 1 in every 5 kids were going to die before they reached adulthood. That is mind-boggling. If anyone loses a child nowadays, it is just like horrifying and so rare, at least how it feels. In 2015, child mortality rates were 4%. And a lot of that is to beautiful advances in modern medicine, vaccines. I know vaccines are a hot topic again. So excited that something that was a hot topic and then became totally normal and then now is a hot topic again. Irregardless, we've eliminated a lot of awful diseases. We've been improving the lifespan. I think there's a lot of fantastic perspective that you can gain from looking back on history on this specific topic of things getting better. Another thing that I kind of wanted to touch on with this more global perspective is the fact that the global GDP is consistently increasing. And something that kind of causes me to talk about this is because a lot of people, particularly people on the left, but there are some people on the right that share this, it's just a lot rarer, have this like utter resentment for billionaires, have this utter resentment for people who have a lot of value in their net worth. And I think a lot of people come from the perspective, outside of the very simpleton, straightforward perspective of like, we'll just take all their money and then just give it to poor people and they'll have millions of dollars and all will be right. I think it's way more complicated than that. And anyone who understands the like balance sheet of a business or like, you know, intermediately understands the stock market knows that it is not that simple. But my entire point of bringing this up is the fact that the global GDP consistently is increasing shows that wealth is not a zero-sum game. I think that is the most important lesson to learn from that. The amount of wealth that we have globally today is so much more than we had 50, 100, 300 years ago. We are consistently... as human beings, we've lived on this planet, and nothing has really changed about the planet itself. The resources have always been there. If a caveman wanted to build a computer, all of the necessary components existed at the time, but the necessary processes and the necessary technologies that could convert those minerals in the ground and other ingredients that no one truly understands fully unless you're an expert, all of those things were there and they could have done it. It probably would have took their entire lifetime, but they could have done it. So when the things that have improved are the technology and the processes. So when you look at modern day, the reason that you have someone like Bill Gates or like Elon Musk or, name your favorite billionaire, they created this value. I don't think they deserve sole credit for that. I want that to be very clear, because I know a lot of people get really upset with the idea that like, oh, they created this value, they're seen as some saint. But they got together teams of people and created a company that made the world a better place. Like, yes, I know a lot of people don't like Jeff Bezos because he's worth so much money, purely on that fact. But the world is a better place because Amazon exists. There are more ways to access products and services because of that company. And I think everyone can agree that if Amazon just like disappeared tomorrow, people would be actively missing it. The world would be worse off, not better. Tons of jobs would go away, yada, 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 the whole case. And I do want to say, I know that wealth concentration is a hot topic. I know that you get someone like Bernie Sanders who comes up and they're like, the top 1% of global conglomerates, the wealth and and goes on the whole rant. And I understand that there are certain cases to be made of wealth distribution. But when so much value is created in the world because so many different very smart people are creating companies that are actively providing products and services that people want, you get value essentially from nothing. These people find new ways to take existing materials and create something entirely new that didn't exist before, that is actively making the world a better place or actively pushing society towards its goals, because society collectively decides that with their money, they are willing to pay for this thing rather than ignore it and let the company die. So I think that as we continue on to the future, even if, and inevitably there will be, more and more billionaires come up, you will get to see the normal person's daily life get better because another Microsoft is made, or because another Amazon is made, or because another Tesla is made. You have these companies that can positively impact the world, and I really hope that that never stops. And on the topic of some of these companies, I want to kind of put a little light on the technologies that we're getting in the near future and how these are, in my opinion, I really think we're kind of on like a tipping point with technology. I understand that a lot of you listening are around my age. I'm 27. I've had a fucking stroke right there. I'm 27. And so you've grown up in the digital age. You've watched the digital revolution happen in your real life. I remember I was talking to someone the other day who was noticeably older than me. I could have been their kid. And I had mentioned VHS tapes, and they were like, you don't know about VHS tapes. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I grew up watching VHS tapes. I had so many Disney movies and XYZ, so many of the classics on there. And it kind of put into perspective for me, like, how much technological change we have seen in our lifetime. I really think it's only going to get crazier. But I think that a lot of really good people are working towards that future being a good one. One of the things that I can think of off the top of my head that has just been really excited lately, and I watched, one of the Green brothers. It was like Hank Green or John Green. I watched one of their YouTube videos, and he recently was talking about nuclear energy and how we're kind of entering a new renaissance on nuclear energy. A lot of people got very scared about nuclear because of the Chernobyl disaster and the Fukushima meltdown after the earthquake in Japan. And a lot of people swore it off, but a lot of the experts in the area, or in the field, should I say, point out the fact that these specific instances, people were actively ignoring government regulations that they cannot get away with ignoring to the same extent in America and in modern day. And so there has been a huge push to get nuclear back up and running again. And it is super important, in my opinion, because I really do think that we are missing out on a very powerful, very abundant, clean, renewable energy from this source. And I think that if we want to push towards a future where we are making sure the planet is taken care of and trying to push to have a more prosperous society, we need technologies like that. And you will, I don't know if anyone's seen, but there was a headline the other day that Amazon announced that they're investing like $500 million into nuclear modular reactors. And I know Microsoft is looking into it. Google is looking at a partnership with a nuclear company. And a lot of these companies are actively doing this because they need this energy for their AI efforts, because they are very, very energy demanding, for lack of a better term. But kind of to transition now into AI, that's the entire reason that these companies are even investing in nuclear. They need a clean energy source in order to power these massive, massive data centers that are training these LLMs, which are, I think, large language models or language learning models, like ChatGPT, like its competitor Claude, like Grok on X. But I actively think that a lot of these technologies are kind of all starting to bear fruit around the same time, and it is going to drastically change our world in the next like 10 to 15 years in a way that a lot of us may not even be fully prepared for. And I think it's totally understandable to be nervous because no one ever truly knows what the future holds. But I really can't help but still be a little bit optimistic when I hear the like lead engineers in these companies talk about the impacts that these things are going to have. So, for instance, as we continue to ramp solar and battery, and as we start ramping nuclear and we start having AI all around the same time, it can power things like a desalination plant, if I'm saying that right. Basically, we will be able to start up processes like removing salt from seawater that are so energy demanding right now that we can't do it profitably or sustainably. But if we had, if we still continue to see success in clean energy and in AI, we'll start being able to solve problems like areas that just don't have clean drinking water. If we can get these plants up and running, you can put them in basically any coastal area and be able to provide a direct source of basically unlimited drinking water. Another thing that has been on my mind a lot lately, and I'm sure most of you know because we're friends, is my car right now, the Tesla Model 3, drives its fucking self. It drives itself. I have the free trial of like the expensive premium version of full self-driving, which is FSD for short. And it is good, guys. For anyone who hasn't experienced it yet, I don't touch the wheel. I get, every time that I have like friends over on the weekends or I'm around the people that I love, if they haven't experienced it yet, I'm like, oh, come. I have the 30-day trial. Let's go. And we'll get in the car and we'll put in a random destination and it'll just go. Unprotected left turns, 4-way stops, turning right at a red arrow. Like all of it is just done like 90% of the time flawlessly. And I don't think it's fully ready to be at the level where I'm going to fall asleep and it's going to take me there. But I already think it is safer than drunk driving. And I think that people are, without this in their car, are actively, like for every single time someone drinks and drives, I think if they had full self-driving in their car, it would inherently make the roads safer consistently. And this is really leading down a road where you will have entire fleets of driverless robo-taxis picking people up and dropping them off in a manner that is safer than a human driver. And I don't think a lot of people have really thought about the repercussions or like the wave of consequences that comes off of that in a good way. The AI department in Tesla has calculated a lot of the costs, and they really think that you'll be able to hail a robo-taxi for about like a third of the cost of an Uber. So that Uber drive that takes you $10 to be able to pay for is going to cost you $3. And I think that there are like super profound effects that come off of this. And I think it's one of those things where, is this going to make a lot of the top executives in Tesla very rich if it is successfully pulled off? Yes. Is Elon Musk's net worth going to go up because of this? Yes. But it is going to make the world an inherently safer and better place. And I think it's going to blow a lot of people's minds. If you have a friend who has a Tesla and they have that feature right now, they have the free trial, you should check it out. Genuinely. I think that a lot of people just do not realize how close we are to this stuff. And I will say, full disclosure, I am a huge Tesla nerd. I've been following this company because I think they do really cool stuff and are consistently making the world a better place for, 5 years now? And another thing that they're working on is the robot. A lot of people know about it. I'm going to assume that there are some people here who don't, so I'm going to give a little brief rundown. But Tesla is actively manufacturing a humanoid robot in which they are going to use the same exact vision AI that they use in the cars, and they're just going to plug it into this robot, and they're going to start using it for like really, really dangerous, low-paying jobs. And the idea is you'll be able to buy one of these. I don't know. My guess is affordably purchase one for like 30 grand. I don't know, in like 10 years. If it's sooner than that, I would love to be wrong. But, and this thing will be able to like do your chores and hop in your driverless car and buy your groceries and bring them back and put them away and prepare a meal. And the possibilities on it are truly endless. And I know it freaks a lot of people out. Like I said before, it's okay to be nervous because this shit's going to be fucking weird. But stuff like that, stuff like what we're seeing with AI and how it is being applied to the medical field, how it's being applied to overall like features of safety, I think that there truly is a bright future ahead of us. And I think that if we can figure out how to exist as human beings together, start having conversations, start humanizing other people who maybe it's a lot easier to just disagree or cut off and walk away, and start kind of pushing towards a more unified culture, particularly in America. I think that there's a lot of hope to be had when you combine that with the direction that innovation and technology is going, the idea that we're constantly trying to improve on safety and health and lifespan and tacking on the right mindset amongst all of it. I really do think that things are going to get better. And I think that you'll be able to, in 20 years from now, sit down and look back and go, dude, we had it kind of rough. Like things were not great. And I won't say rough. Rough is maybe a little bit of a stretch. I don't think things are that bad right now. I think that there's a lot to be grateful for. But I think that the future is exciting. I think that there are a lot of things that will, we didn't even realize we could have had improved that will make our lives actively better. And with that being said, guys, talking is hard. This shit is tiring, man. To have your brain on for like consistent flows of thought is not for the weak. This is going to sound a lot better than it actually did when I recorded it, because I will be kind of cutting out blocks of silence for me to be able to think, so it isn't too boring or drab during those moments. So what you hear is, there's a little bit of makeup on it. It's a little better than what is actually happening. But just to summarize, we got into my personal perspectives on truth and what it means to make sure that you have the stuff that you believe actually in alignment with reality. Make sure that accountability is a healthy factor of your life, and looking at what you are capable of doing and knowing that you are, if you continue to make good decisions and have the right mindset, capable of truly taking on whatever it is that you desire and you envision as, wouldn't that be a beautiful life someday? That can be yours. That you can do that. It's just a matter of applying the right mindset and applying the right truths. Combine that with the incredible opportunities in the future that I see coming down the pipeline. And guys, I think we can be optimistic. I think things are getting better. And I think if things are going to get worse, I think that there's a lot of really good people in the world who love to work on problems and make things get better. I don't really believe that progress will be a straight line. I don't think that we will just consistently get, every year will be better than the last. I think, at least for my generation, COVID was a really great lesson for that. It was the first time I ever felt the world get worse, like way, way worse. And that was, I think, a good lesson to learn, is that you cannot take this progress for granted. You cannot take this amazing march towards betterment that humanity has been able to pull off for the however many thousands of years. You can't, it's not automatic. It's not just granted. It's not given. It has to be earned. And you do have to grit your teeth, and you do have to endure some suffering and some bad times. But at the end of the day, I really think that you can find really good reasons for being optimistic about where your life is going. And you can find really good reasons for being optimistic about where the world is going. And I don't think you need to discredit any of the poor, unfortunate truths of this world in order to get to this mindset. With that being said, I'm Tub. I've been your host. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode, quote unquote, first episode of Unserious University. I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. And we'll see what happens next week. We'll see what I cook up. I'm excited. And either way, I'm optimistic that it'll be a good episode. So thank you guys. Have a good night. Have a good day. Have a good morning, wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this. I will catch you on the next one.